Good Saturday morning to you, everybody, and welcome to Legal Notes with Mary and Charron and Ned Barron from Charter Oak Law. Good morning, gang. How are you this morning?
Good morning.
Nice to see you.
You too.
How was your week?
Fantastic.
Busy as usual.
I mean, listen, being busy is good, especially now when a lot of people aren't so busy with their work. But
I know. We're grateful.
Yeah, as you should be. But does it get... I would imagine it keeps you on your toes because every situation, every family, every dynamic, every need is unique to that individual and that family, right?
Not only that, but everyone is very important, right, to them and to us, as an extension. But all these issues that we deal with are really important to those families.
How often do you come across a client where they come up with a scenario or a need that you've never encountered before?
Not often.
No.
I mean,
I was going to say every week.
Wow. Okay. I'm confused, but go ahead. That's why I asked.
It's like family dynamics. I mean, I suppose there's always a story to top another story, but the themes seem to repeat. So maybe that's what I'm talking about. But there are new things, there are new ways that people come up with taking advantage of elderly people. There are new lows that people sink to steal money or take things. There are impacts of illness and disease that you can't necessarily anticipate. But the themes themselves, from the way I look at it, tend to be the same. But
I think that there are twists.
Yeah.
That are
Always.
novel, right? That we don't always we haven't had that exact example, and it may be somewhat similar. It's still a little novel, and we have to do research to figure out, okay, well, how are we going to be able to address this issue?
Yeah.
Before I get into our topic of discussion, I guess I have a follow-up question. Are you automatically skeptical when you meet somebody in this field? Like, for example, I once talked to I shouldn't say once, several times I've talked to a police officer, and they're always you're kind of like lying to them until you prove that you're telling the truth. It's something weird, and actually the way he explained it, which was much better than I just did, made a lot of sense because they're being lied to every day, all the time. What were you doing? Nothing. I was doing But I would imagine though, being attorneys, where everybody seems to have an angle these days, or a motive.
Well, there are certainly certain circumstances where we are very suspicious. So when you have a next door neighbor or a friend, or maybe it could be a child too, who's like, Mom wants to change her will and make me the beneficiary, right? Bing, bing, bing. Like, those are the type of things where I would have to say, you're like, oh, well, you do know that Mom is the client, not you. And we would have to meet with Mom alone, kind of thing, right? Yeah. So that's certainly, I mean, there are times when...
Yeah, you mentioned the neighbor, and we've been involved in cases where...
Yes, we certainly have.
A neighbor takes an elderly neighbor to an attorney that elderly neighbor had never knew, to have them sign a power of attorney giving the neighbor the authority to manage their finances. And no family member was
made
told
aware,
about this,
known, yes.
Right. So then that those are situations where obviously the flags are not only go up, but they're waving. And,
Wow.
That's right. He's right.
Wow.
He's right. When we had that, so there are certain situations, but I think I always ask. I don't know how you, when you do an intro with an estate planning client, but I always ask, okay, so what made you decide to contact an attorney now? Like, did something happen? What got you to this place? And their answer is usually pretty telling, So
I bet. And again, one more follow up before we talk about Medicare and Medicaid. Have you ever had to involve the police in anything? Because you see shenanigans all the time.
Yep. I I have tried to.
Tried to.
Yeah.
Yes.
So very
Yeah.
interesting. I was appointed by a probate court to be the involuntary conservator, meaning that the person was found to be incapable of making decisions for themselves by the probate court. And I was appointed as their conservator of person and estate, meaning that ultimately I had the legal power or authority to make medical and financial decisions for this person. And now, just to recap, in Connecticut, it's the least restrictive means, meaning that to the extent that a conserved person can make decisions for themselves, you're supposed to allow them to do that. And so, for this person, I was trying to take a hands-off approach to allow him to manage a certain amount of money on his own. But I was finding out that he kept calling me for more money. And when I would ask him why he doesn't have money, he told me that he gave it to this woman. And trying to get him to understand that he can't do that, that he's only has a certain amount of allowance because I was paying his rent, I was paying, for his food, I was paying for other expenses. And it turns out that this woman had a drug problem and that she
befriended
sold
him.
her services
Yes.
to men, and that he was giving her money in anticipation of receiving some benefit for that.
Right.
But because he wasn't getting that much money, she wasn't giving him anything in return. And so the point was
If
that
she ever planned
right.
to or not, we don't know.
So, but the bottom line was that she was financially exploiting him, and so I first turned to the police and said, "Look, this is a vulnerable elderly gentleman who is being taken advantage of somebody, and this woman keeps going after him." And so I went to the police department and explained this. And I'm pretty naive about what the police department's willingness to get involved in, but I thought, geez, something,
Let's
something
keep this
has
woman
to be
away,
done.
right?
Right. And their response was, well, why are you giving him money? And I thought, well, because, he needs some, spending money. He needs to buy the things that he needs to buy that I'm not providing for him. And they said, well, that's, you should stop giving him money. And my response to this police officer was, and this was a female police officer, my response was, if you gave money to your child and somebody came up to that child every week, you were giving your child their allowance, and every week someone from school came up to them and said, give me your allowance, would you just say, oh, then I'm just going to stop giving my child money? Or would you do something about it? Well, that's different. That's a child. I was like, no, this is a person who has been found to be incapable of making decisions for themselves, just like a child is considered to be incapable of making decisions for themselves. Therefore, he has to be protected. Well, there's nothing we can do about it. That was that time. Then there came a time where this woman ended up exploiting him, getting his cell phone, and then she.
But you had to go to court.
Well,
Did you go to court to have a restraining order?
No, I didn't. But what eventually
you
ended
ended
up
up to do.
happening was the bank made a mistake. I had given him I set up a bank account for him. So I had two different bank accounts. One where the bulk of his money was in. The other one was for him to be able to access through a debit card. And he had given his debit card to this woman. The woman didn't return it to him. I had the bank issue another debit card. And when the bank issued that debit card, they attached it to the account that I controlled. So he gave her the debit card again, and she ended up taking out something like $2,500 from the account.
Oh boy!
So now it was done at the drive-through. There was video. Now I go back to the police and say, okay, she stole his cell phone and she now took money from this account. Are you going to do something now? And they finally did something then. Long story short, that in cases like those, I did have to go to the police, but it took me, 2 or 3 times of going there and saying,
that's sad.
You need to do something. And there was just not a desire there, I thought, for someone, to help out with this case.
Yeah.
It's too bad they couldn't have been more responsive the first time there. Please.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I want to say about it, though, is that, but then, of course, this woman goes through she's already been in the system. She has, drug possession, charges that, and once they go into the system, did she ever get punished for this?
Probably not.
She didn't. So
No.
in the end, it was kind of unsatisfying.
Yeah, I had a circumstance. I called the police because there was a drug dealer that had started stacking up with one of my people, and I was like, "Look," and he was
one of your conserve people.
Yeah. So, right, and they're like, "Until we catch him dealing, we can't do anything about it." I said, "What do you mean? I'm handing you this man. He's there. He's living there, And finally, he slept with somebody who I don't know, let's call it a rival gang or something like that, but someone who he wasn't supposed to sleep with. And he got beaten up. And then the police came because of the fight.
Oh, my goodness.
But not because I called to say there is somebody who is taking advantage. And so I think a lot of times, police think of these as like domestic, kind of things, and they don't want to necessarily be involved if there's not some sort of like exigent circumstance. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. In my experience, I'm not saying that they aren't helpful. It's just that our first course of action is usually having to go to the courts.
I ask only because, I hate to hear of somebody taking advantage of
absolutely
a person in this position who is not capable of taking care of themselves. That's just. I don't like to see anybody being taken advantage of, but I almost think it's not fair game when you're going after somebody who is elderly or
vulnerable.
Vulnerable, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think one of the misconceptions I had was that that the state has systems in place to prevent this from happening, or I should say, vigorous systems in place. By example, I was involved in a case. I was not the conservator. I was the court-appointed attorney for a gentleman who was being exploited online. He was deaf, and he had worked his life, had a life savings, retirement accounts, and all that. And he became a victim of an online scam. And the scammers, who ended up being from West Africa, scammed him out of his life savings. We're talking $300,000 to $400,000.
Oh wow!
The Department of Social Services, they have an office for
waste, fraud, and abuse, or you mean like
scams
for the protection of elderly.
Oh yeah, yep.
I can't believe it's escaping me right now, but I had, in that other case where that woman of the night was taking advantage of a gentleman.
Did you love that woman of the night?
Putting it lightly,
that was so nice.
In case you didn't figure that out, it was a lady of the night.
That was nice.
I like some of those old-fashioned phrases.
That was
good.
That was nice.
That was artful.
Yes, it was artful.
But I went to the Adult Protective Services. That's what they're called. And so I went to them to say the exact same thing I said to the police. He's being financially exploited. What can you do about it? And they said, well, does he have a conservator? And I said, yes, I'm his conservator. They said, well, that's the most we can do. We can investigate it, and then at the end of the day, we can either ourselves apply to the probate court to have a conservator appointed or have someone else do it. But other than that, they don't have any authority.
Yeah, and they're not going to get that money back from where? West Africa? Is that what you said?
Well, that case was really fascinating because because I met with my client and the Adult Protective Services. That's how I got involved. This was through Adult Protective Services had filed a petition for conservatorship for this gentleman in the probate court, and I was appointed by the court to represent this gentleman in the conservatorship. Okay. We had a meeting at his house with an interpreter, a sign language interpreter, with someone from the Secret Service, because they got involved because this was now an international case, because his funds, he had wired them out of his bank account to another bank, and they tracked it down, and it went somewhere overseas. And so the Secret Service agent told this gentleman that you are being scammed, and it's likely that the scam is coming out of West Africa or someplace over there, because that's where this is happening, and that you're being scammed and do not send them any more money. And he did end up sending them more money, and to his detriment. But the really interesting thing for me was that the reason why he sent the money is he kept insisting that there was this attorney involved who had won a case for him, that he didn't start the case. She just started it for him on his own. And he was convinced that he now had this big award, but out of North Carolina, and that he, against a bank, for discriminating against him because he was deaf. And that what he had to do was to put up a bond or put up funds in order to release the $100-and-something thousand that he had won. So he had to put up like $50,000. So this was the scam. I kept telling him, no, it's a scam. Have that attorney call me. I'll talk to that attorney.
Yeah.
So I get a phone call on my cell phone that has I think it was a Montana phone number on it. And it was really crackly, and it was, it was a real problem. And so that call just didn't happen. I couldn't hear the other person on the other line. So 2 seconds later, after we hang up, another call comes through, and it's with a foreign phone number, and it's a lot clearer. And there's this woman on the other end of the line who has a very thick accent, and is telling me that,
and all the red flags are going off in your mind, going, yeah.
Oh, he's loving this. He's like, Marianne, this is really great.
Wow.
Watch this.
Yeah, great from an interesting, bad because it's this part of the scam,
right?
And so I finally say to this woman, after she's telling me, we just start this conversation, and because it's a foreign phone number, I said, so where are you calling from? And this is supposed to be an attorney in North Carolina. And she said, why? I'm calling from North Carolina. Carolina, right? And there was some kerfuffle on the other end of the line, and the line went dead. And so that was it. 4 minutes later, I got a call from my client. I can't believe you asked her. She just called me to tell me she was so upset because you asked her where she was calling from. And this is, you're making me lose this money and all that. And anyway, the bottom line was, I had that phone number. I looked it up online, and it was a phone number from West Africa, and it was known as part of a scam.
Oh boy.
And anyway, it just proved to me, and I still could never convince this client that he was being scammed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a really sad story.
That is a sad story. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Folks, you are listening to Legal Notes with Marianne Charron and Ned Barron from Charter Oak Law Group. Let's go to the mailbag. We received an email from a gentleman by the name of Kenneth in Windsor.
Yeah.
I think it's based on last week's show. He asked if he gifted more than $15,000 to a family member, would he have to pay a gift tax? Who wants to take that?
Well, Ned can. That was his show. I was away.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So
I know, but I've been talking so much at this show. But, all right. In a nutshell, Kenneth. So every year, well, let me back up a second. Connecticut has a gift tax, which means that we as individuals, if we give money to people other than our spouse, that gift could be subject to gift taxes. The gift tax is unified with our estate tax. So right now in Connecticut, we're allowed to give 7.1. If we die in 2021, we're allowed to leave to people other than our spouse, free of estate tax, up to $7.1 million. We could also give that $7.1 million away during our lifetime. The result would be that we're going to give up being able to leave $7.1 million at our death, right? It's either or a combination. If I give $2 million during my life, I only have $5.1 million I can leave at my death. So having said that, any gift that we make over the $7.1 million is taxable, meaning that we have to pay gift tax on it.
Right. So Kenneth didn't say if he already had given $7 million away.
Right.
His question. But I think his question had to do with something more basic from yourself.
So there is an annual exemption amount or exclusion that we're allowed to give away free of estate tax and free from lowering the amount that we can ultimately leave at our death or during life. That's $7.1 million. So we can give $15,000 to any number of people, individuals that we want.
Okay.
So Gary, if I had the money and was really generous, I could give you $15,000.
And then maybe
every year, I could give your wife, I could give your child,
your partner.
He did not mention me. Did you notice that?
I did notice that.
But I give so much already.
Oh, wow!
But so I could give $15,000 to 20, to 50, 100 individuals, and
as long as you're not exceeding that $7.1 million.
You never. No, it's not even counted toward the $7. It's not even counted. So you are allowed to give $15,000 every year to whomever you want to, and it will never touch that threshold.
And it's to as many people as you want.
All right.
So if you have
wow,
nieces and nephews and children, and you have this big extended family, and you have a bunch of money, you could give them all $15,000 in 1 year.
And never have to file a gift tax return. And none of it would have to be included as part of your total overall lifetime gifting. But if you gave them $16,000 instead of $15,000, you do have to then file a gift tax return. But that doesn't mean you pay a tax.
For the $1,000.
For the $1,000.
Okay, that was going to be my follow-up question. For the $1,000 difference or for the entire 16?
Just the $1,000.
Okay.
All right?
Sure.
So having to file a gift tax return does not mean that you have to pay a gift tax on that gift. You have to file the return. You
actually can. If you want to, you can. So that way, preserve your $7.1 million that you leave at death.
Okay, all right.
But most people would say, no, I'm not. Why would I pay tax now? I just wait, till I die.
When I'm gone, let somebody else be.
If I have more than $7 million, right? Exactly.
Right.
So
a problem I would like to have, but
yes.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you a follow-up question, but I know there's other things we want to get to, particularly when it comes to Medicare. I mean, are there a lot of people that meet that threshold of 7.1? You meet with a lot of people that...
We meet with people who clearly are in and around that level. I mean, not a lot of people, right? I mean, as we know statistically, people who have that type of income, what is that, like in the top, 1%? So I would have to say the majority of our clients do not have that kind of money, but we definitely do planning for people who have.
Yeah, and as we talked about too, just to reiterate, Gary, is that what we had talked about, I don't know if it was last time or the time before, that there are huge changes afoot with our tax structure from a federal level, and if that happens on the federal level, it's going to happen on the state level.
Because we mirror them, right?
Well, we will in 2023, I think, is when Connecticut, if nothing changes, Connecticut is going to be linked.
Yeah.
Oh.
Right, to whatever the federal is. And we already know, if nothing is done, that in 2026, that the federal exemption is going back to $5.6 million. But we know also that President Biden and the Democratic Congress are going to do something about taxes.
Yeah, they're looking.
And estate taxes are prime for picking. And my guess is if I had to bet, pick a number and put your money down on it, I would say $2 million is probably going to be my bet. Is going to be the exemption. And now we're into...
That's his. Mine is it's going to go back to the old level. Which
you think
is
it's going to stick at 5.6?
I do. That's my bet.
What are you basing? What are you each basing that on? You're $2 million and you're 5.6.
Well, my $2 million, I'm basing it on that during the Democratic primary, that Amy Klobuchar, who is a sitting senator and who was a candidate for the Democratic nomination, said she wants it to go back to $2 million. Bernie Sanders was saying 3.5 million, where it was at not too long ago also. So I'm just thinking, with what's going on with all the money that they've printed, over the last year, that they're gonna be stuck with trying to come up with money somewhere. And I want to say it's easy pickings, but it's certainly.
Yeah, because they're preying on people who, if you've got this type of money, you're not going to feel the hurt as much. Is that what you're thinking?
Or the person whose money it is not now isn't living now,
that's
right, to complain about it. If you take it out of income taxes, which
you're living,
and they're already talking about raising the capital gains tax, which is it's.
Thank goodness I'm here.
Boy.
Okay.
Folks.
To balance everything out. Okay.
I want to know where your number's coming from.
Well, we only have. I've got to wrap the show up.
Thanks, Ned. Notice how he took all my time.
I know. What happened to that?
I just want to point that out. All right.
All right. We'll start this. We'll start this on the next show.
No.
Mary Ann, we'll give you more time in the next show,
week.
Folks.
Thank you.
If you've got questions or you'd like to find out more about Charter Oak Law, please visit their website, www.charteroaklaw.com. Again, charteroaklaw.com. If you've got an email, maybe you'd like to have it asked on this show next week, just email us at legalnotes@charteroaklaw.com. And if you'd like to make an appointment with either Mary Ann or Ned, their phone number is 860-570-1229. Again, 860-570-1229. For Mary Ann, Sharon, and Ned Barron, I'm Gary Byron. Thanks for listening. Have a good one, everybody. So long.